Hey, everybody, it's Derrick Ruiz from eXp Realty, your apartment broker and expert, also author of Cloud Agent and Unlock the Real Estate Game. And today I have the distinct pleasure of a interview with Sheri Swist of the HRCLA.org, which stands for Housing Reform Coalition of Los Angeles, which is a nonprofit public interest corporation. HRCLA focuses on educating landlords and, in some case, tenants about their rights when dealing with the city of LA. HRCLA also litigates cases against the city to challenge potentially unconstitutional practices employed by the city through the Rent Stabilization Ordinance, RSO, and REAP, and the Systematic Code Enforcement Program. And if you own a unit in Los Angeles, the inspections and REAP and the city and how they seem to be a little bit on the case of landlords these days and making you do all kinds of repairs and stuff. Let me tell you a little bit about Sheri. She has an undergraduate in piano performance from Humboldt State University and a JD from Pepperdine University. She has owned and operated businesses, been a landlord in Los Angeles, but for Sheri's been working in the real estate area of law with a specialty in the Rent Escrow Account Program, also known as REAP, and the Systematic Code Enforcement Program, also known as SCEP, in the city of LA. And she runs the housing section of LA we call it HRCLA. And let's go ahead. Sheri, thanks for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So you're very welcome. Can you explain to our viewers what exactly REAP is to start with?
Yes, REAP is the Rent Escrow Account Program, and basically it goes hand in hand with SCEP, which you mentioned earlier, which is a Systematic Code Enforcement Program. I'm going to kind of explain them together since they are very intertwined. What happens is all property in Los Angeles with 2 or more units is subject to the SCEP inspections. So an inspector will come out every 3 to 4 years. It's mandated that they do that every 3 to 4 years to inspect all rental units in buildings 2 or more. So duplexes and anything above that. At that point, if they find, they're supposed to be looking for habitability violations. So if they find things that need to be fixed, they'll write you up and give you what's called a notice in order to comply and say you've got 30 days to fix these problems. We're going to come back for a reinspection on such and such day and time. And then if you've corrected all the violations, they'll sign off and you're good to go. However, if you haven't corrected them, and you don't have an extension granted, then your program will be referred to REAP, which is the Rent Escrow Account Program. The city will then notify you and your tenants that certain violations remain a problem in the building, and that the rent for whatever units are affected by those violations will be reduced by a certain amount. It could be 10 to 50%. They then tell the tenants that not only has your rent been reduced by whatever percentage they decide, and this is all decided without any kind of fair return analysis. It's a bit arbitrary. Then they tell the tenant the remainder of the rent, which you still do owe, you may pay. Rather than pay to the landlord, you may pay into an escrow account. So that's where you get the Rent Escrow Account Program. So then at that point, the landlord is actually deprived of 100% of their rent, at least temporarily, until they can manage to get the property removed from REAP, which is no small task.
Right. Yeah. Well, most landlords in LA that are watching this video are probably quite familiar with the SCEP inspections, where you get a notice and you have to let the inspector in to look at everything. And I've been told they're looking for things that are broken, repair and maintenance issues, peeling paint, water leaks, smoke detectors or carbon monoxide detectors that are not installed or not functional, but it seems like after all kinds of things, anything they see, they'll note, and it's quite a pain in the rear. I've helped several clients get out of REAP recently, and what do you recommend an owner does if they are notified that they're going to be a SCEP inspection in their property?
Well, first of all, I'm not giving legal advice, but as far as just having been a landlord in Los Angeles myself and being very experienced with the system, there's a couple of things at play. One is there's actually a Fourth Amendment violation that is occurring when these inspectors demand to come into your tenant's home or your unit, um, because they are vested with full police power, which a lot of people don't realize. So you basically have a government agent coming in and doing a search of the tenant's home. So first of all, they don't actually have to allow them in. They can say, no, my landlord's great. I don't have any problems, and I really don't want you coming through my home. It's a sacred space. That's why we have the Fourth Amendment. And so if you have tenants that are happy and you're happy with them and everything is fine, they can always decline to allow the inspector in. And the inspector then has to go and get an administrative warrant if they really want to come in. So that's one issue. If you want to have the SCEP inspections, if the tenants are, saying, yeah, come on in, then the landlord should definitely prepare for them, give the proper notice to the tenant and go in prior to the inspection and make sure everything is, like you mentioned, the smoke detectors, that they're in working order, carbon monoxide detectors. Make sure all the screens are not ripped or have problems, because the inspectors were literally cite you for having ripped screens. So just do a general check of the unit to make sure everything is in order. And I would recommend doing that as close to the time before the inspection as possible, while still allowing yourself enough time to make any, repairs or corrections that need to be made. The reason I say that is because you do have some tenants that are a bit unscrupulous and savvy to the system, and they're looking for that rent reduction. So sometimes tenants will actually cause the violations, break smoke detectors, do things like that on purpose, flood toilets. I mean, I've seen it all, just to get the property put into REAP so their rent is reduced. Especially if you have a problem with,
You mean there are actually unscrupulous tenants out there?
imagine
I'm
that.
shocked.
I know the landlords are always the one to be made out to be the bad guy, but the truth is, the way the system is set up, it's ripe for being gamed by unscrupulous tenants for sure. And the the scales are so tilted against the landlords, that it's a very difficult fight once you have a problem with a SCEP inspector and REAP and all of that.
Sheri, this just sounds like a racket to me to make money. I mean, how much money does the city pull in annually from these SCEP inspections and REAP
Well,
and
frankly,
late fees and
that's
visits to
yeah,
the property?
yeah, I understand. The word racket has been used many times. Um, in my experience, what I've seen in the last 4 years is there's definitely a problem with this system. The SCEP inspections are they basically charge every unit each year $43.32, and that can be paid either by the landlord or passed through to the tenants. So sometimes the tenants are literally paying to have their Fourth Amendment rights violated when they don't want an inspector walking through their home, their bathroom, all of this kind of stuff. Um, the total amount the city is bringing in from these SCEP fees is roughly $29 million a year. So it's a lot of money
Wow.
annually. That's just for the inspections that are the regular ones. Then if they have to come back for re-inspections after, I believe, the third inspection, they start charging the landlord per inspection. So let's say you had they'll write you up for violations that may not be able to be repaired within 30 days or 60 days. So then they come back. Maybe you need to get a permit for some work, and that doesn't happen overnight. So that if they keep having to come back, then they're billing more fees for this. Also, if the property goes into REAP, not only does the landlord have a cancellation of part of their rent and possibly all of it because it's being paid into the escrow account, at least temporarily, every unit that's in REAP, there's a $50 per month administrative fee that is charged to that unit. So I can't even tell you what the actual number is of revenue the city is bringing in, because I don't believe it costs $50 per month to have a bank account open. So there definitely is a little bit of a question on where that money is exactly going as well.
Right. And who do you think are the most vulnerable to getting into REAP and getting in trouble with the city? Because you mentioned to me that the senior citizens, the elderly that own property, and I think you said people that don't speak good English are more vulnerable to this stuff because they're just not used to navigating the city and all the things they have to go through. Is that what your experience
Yeah,
is?
what I've seen a lot of is elderly people and non-English as a first language people have a very difficult time with it because, for example, if your property is accepted into REAP and you get the notice of acceptance,
Mhm.
until recently, you had 10 days to appeal that, and you had to go, it was a very quick turnaround, and if you didn't get that appeal in time, your property was simply accepted into REAP. You didn't have the opportunity to present evidence to say, "Here's why I haven't fixed the violations. I'm waiting for a permit," or "I did fix the violations, and here I have evidence, photographic evidence of I fixed it, and then 2 days later, the tenant broke it again." You lose that opportunity. And so for elderly people, they get an 8-page letter, front and back spaced, where they may not act quickly. They may need a moment to get some help from their children or legal counsel or something like that to know what to do. And then they lose their right of appeal. Same with non-English speaking people, or, people who English is a little bit second language kind of situation. So um, I think people like that are the most at risk. However, I will say that the city, in response to many lawsuits against the city, including some brought by HERCLA, they have changed their policy to afford, quote unquote, more due process to people who have been accepted into REAP by granting them an automatic appeal to the general manager. It's still a difficult process for people who are not savvy and, well able to deal with these kind of things. So
Yeah, well, the two clients that I've helped get out of REAP recently are both one was in his 70s and the other lady was in her middle 80s,
mhm.
and they weren't sharp anymore. The paperwork and the mail and the phone calls and the getting it just was a mess. So I mean, it's not that difficult really to me because it's just paperwork, phone calls, and getting repairs done. But some of these people that are, quite elderly, it's not that easy. And if they don't have, kids or friends or people close by that can help them, it's really difficult. And I can imagine if you don't speak English as your first language, that could be difficult as well. Can you tell us more about HERCLA and what the organization does? And you mentioned you have filed, I believe your HERCLA has filed the lawsuit. So can you tell us about the organization and tell us about the lawsuit?
Yeah. So basically, the Housing Reform Coalition of Los Angeles is a 501c4 nonprofit education corporation. And we have filed several lawsuits against the city over the past several years regarding SCEP and REAP. As I mentioned, one of them had to do with the lack of due process. And the city has, in fact, changed that to grant an automatic appeal to try to, you know, uh, give more due process. Another was in regards to the fact that when a property was in REAP, if you had the property removed from REAP, the violations are corrected, the city council, and it's not just okay, have an inspector come out there and have them sign off, okay, boom, next month you get your full rent. No, it has to go to the Los Angeles City Council, which that takes probably another month or two. And then they have to approve, okay, yes, we see that this is all signed off on. So you're talking about there's a few more months of lost rent, canceled
Right.
rent. And basically what they were doing is saying that if you had a unit that was in REAP and it's out now and it becomes vacant, that for an entire year you were not subject to vacancy decontrol and that you could not rent the unit for more than the previous tenant had rented it for. Now that's a direct violation of the Costa-Hawkins Act, which is state law, and that preempts the Los Angeles Municipal Code. So we were able to get the city to change that. They no longer do that. Now you're allowed to have your proper vacancy decontrol. The city had to pay attorney's fees. There's a couple of attorneys that work really strongly with HRCLA and bringing these cases. And they're smaller firms in Santa Monica. And then also there is a larger class action lawsuit regarding the SCEP inspections, which I referred to earlier as being a violation of your Fourth Amendment rights. There's actually lawsuits like this around the country that are being won for various municipalities in various states that are having similar programs to SCEP. And the bottom line is that courts are ruling this is a Fourth Amendment violation. So the very large law firm Quinn Emanuel has brought a class action lawsuit and are now waiting for class certification on that case. And we'll see how that goes. So HRCLA is involved with all of these different lawsuits and educating the public on their rights. Ooh, I'm sorry
about
there.
that. Where can people get a hold of you?
You may look on our website at HRCLA.com. I'm sorry, HRCLA.org, HRCLA.org, or our phone number is the best number to reach me at, which I'm the main person that handles HRCLA, is 310-869-5153.
Great. And so this class action lawsuit, are landlords automatically part of this if we own property that's under rent control in Los
Yeah.
Angeles?
Yeah, and in fact, you don't even have to be under rent control because SCEP inspections apply to even non-RSO multi-unit buildings. So basically the class, there's two subclasses. One is for landlords and one is for tenants who have paid that SCEP fee. And so right now, as I said, we're waiting for class certification, and the next move will be to go for injunctive relief on the current manner the SCEP inspections are conducted in.
Got it. Okay. So how can property owners help you or get involved? Because
The
I'm sure there's
best
a lot of landlords out there that own a lot of property that, maybe have the wherewithal to help out.
Yes, and what we do need is people to join as members, and we ask people to donate a membership fee of $250 annually. It is tax deductible. We've been fortunate to have one very generous landlord funding most of this litigation up until this point, and a couple of others that have also been kicking in to help with all of this. But at this point, HRCLA really does need financial support to be able to continue. We're doing really good work, and we are probably the most aggressive organization against the city as far as Los Angeles. There are other organizations such as AGLA and Apartment Owners Association who we work closely with. I often write articles for the Apartment Owners Association. They're a wonderful group as well. But for going after the city and really educating people and protecting landlords' rights, HRCLA is definitely the most aggressive.
Great. Yeah. Well, you guys are doing great work out there. I'm so glad that I met you and connected with you and bring this information about your organization and what's going on with the city of Los Angeles and how they're really harassing landlords right now. I mean, just it's amazing. I have got like 4 or 5 apartment owners I know right now that are either dealing with the city or in REAP and just having a hard time, dealing with the city because they're so unresponsive and they seem to be so punitive. So give everybody your website address again.
It's www.hrcla.org.
Great. Well, again, everybody, I want to thank Sheri Swist from Hercula spending some time with us today. I hope this was helpful. If you need to reach her, go to the website, send her email address will be there, of course. And we appreciate your time, Sheri. So thank you very much. Again, this is Derrick Ruiz. You're welcome. This is Derrick Ruiz with eXp Realty, your apartment broker and expert. Again, I want to thank Sheri Swist for spending time with us today, and we'll talk to you all soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.